with the advent of this whole new year, multiple things have changed a bit from the last year. So how's your life going from in this new transformation that we are facing after the lockdown and everything, the pandemic and everything in the last year,
So, for
unfortunate year?
me, I've been working from home for many, many years actually. So, from that perspective, going into lockdown from a work point of view wasn't too much of a change. Of course, like all of us, our travel got curtailed. I enjoyed that because I didn't have to spend so many days on an aeroplane every every week, and I got to spend more time with my two little kids growing up. So overall, I'm actually pretty blessed to be in a position that I haven't had to move too much from my home.
And that is a different thing. But when we are bound to stay at home, I suppose it's also hard for the children. So what were your techniques to like keep your children excited and not feel the blues of
Yeah,
this whole long
parenting is a
lockdown?
very interesting, fascinating journey, and it's a shame that there's no book that comes out after the baby and the womb and the uterus for with the placenta. So my wife and I, we've got like so many parents out there, we are constantly trying to figure out what the right way of doing things are. And we've got two kids. I've got a 4-year-old
Yeah.
son, Aiden, and I've got a 2-year-old daughter, Eva. So for Aiden, it was actually his first year of big school. He joined lower KG. And unfortunately for him, it's had to have been done on his iPad. So it means that, of course, there are challenges when it comes to learning and development and relationships and discipline, etc. But we're trying to navigate that as best we can. For our daughter, I mean, she's just having a blast because she is surrounded by us all the time, and we're seeing how much faster she has grown, I think, because of having so many people around her all the time. So, it's a double-edged sword, and we're trying to figure it out each day as it comes.
So another new thing that is arriving this year, and we were waiting for it, is the new thing that you are bringing to us, and we have been, there's a lot of anticipation and everything about the new book. So how was working on it, and how are you
Here it
feeling right
is.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
the human
So,
egg.
thank you. Actually, I've been looking forward to this for many years. It's been 6 years in the making, actually, since I first started writing this. And it's a piece of work that I decided to do when I thought, how wonderful would it be for my children to get inspired and love science the same way that I do from the words of their father. So that was the inspiration behind writing this book. And it's a journey for everyone. It's a journey into the human body by traveling to some of the most extreme and different environments around the planet. Each chapter is dedicated to a different extreme environment, from climbing Mount Everest, going to Mars, to the bottom of this Mariana Trench, surviving in the Sahara, the South Pole, etc. And it really, hopefully, takes you, the reader, on this journey to understand what your physiology is really made of by, firstly, of course, seeing what the geography is like, but then going inside, as I said, and looking at that cellular biology on the backdrop of human history, and bringing in some interesting stories from my own travels and also from some incredible expeditions through history as well.
So I personally believe that experience is the best teacher when it comes to everything, I suppose. So I guess you too believe in this, and that is why we have come with such a great book that I am really excited to read. And what was your whole experience, writing this? Did you evolve as a person
No, it's
on
an
this
amazing
whole journey?
question, and absolutely, I think the word evolution is a wonderful term to use in this instance. So, look, I fell in love with human adventure from the chemistry textbooks and the biology textbooks because at a very early age, so whilst I was at medical school, I took a year out to do a Bachelor of Science degree. And in that, I focused a lot on what's called extreme physiology. So what happens to the body when you push it to extreme environments? And I was in the Air Force at that point in time, in the Royal Air Force. So I had a chance to work with fighter pilots up close. My dissertation was really looking at the heart in microgravity, so in space environments. So I spent time working on the human spaceflight program at NASA and working with astronauts, etc. So this was an incredible time for me because it was all about optimizing our potential. How can we each be the best version of ourselves? And as you said, that's the journey of evolution, right? It's a journey that we're constantly having to work on this organic machine, our body and our brain. And of course, through writing it, I've been on my own journey. Long distance running is something that I've fallen in love with over the last 6, 7 years. And I got a chance to do many half marathons, and then finally in 2020, I made the decision to run my first full marathon, luckily before the lockdown. So this was the Mumbai Marathon. January 19th, 2020 was when I did that. And of course, you know, I've done other things like cycling and swimming, etc. for triathletes.
Yeah.
So this is a journey of evolution which has come through in the book as well. Yeah. You were saying?
So yeah, I was saying that something you have. I mean, you're not only a person who's restricted to a certain genre, because your whole experience and your work has been distributed in multiple spheres of the society. You have helped a lot of people, but along everything and keeping everything aside, your noble work and everything. One thing that intrigued me a lot, that is your, world record that you have. So it intrigued me a lot. And can you please
So
share
I,
that?
I have a Guinness record for backwards running, and this is a record that I share with my wife actually, and actually my son even has it, and I'll tell you the full story. So a few years ago, you probably gathered by now, I love the opportunity to amass experiences, and the quirkiness of life is something that I believe we should all embrace. So a few years ago on social media, this thing popped up on one of the platforms saying, would you like to get a Guinness record? And I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is something interesting and fun. And it was happening in Bombay, which is Mumbai, the city that I live in. So I managed to convince my wife, Raina, that, look, this is a running record, so we should definitely do it. And we woke up very early. We live in South Bombay, and we drove the car out to Powai, which is up north, at around 5 a.m. And it turns out that this was the record which was being set for the largest number of people to race one another backwards, running backwards, racing each other over the distance that was prescribed by the Guinness authorities, which was, I think, around 700 meters, something like this. So we were 1,200 people. It was previously set by Munich, the city. So Mumbai was trying to beat that. We were around 12 or 1,400 people, and we had 3 attempts in 30 minutes. The first one we failed. It was a massive mess, as you can imagine, just people doing all kinds of things. And for that attempt, actually, because Aiden was only, well, he must have been about 12 or 13 months old, we took him with us. So I had the pram. So picture this, I have a pram, and I'm actually running backwards, and I'm pulling the pram backwards with this little newborn child in it. And of course, Guinness folks said, no, this, you cannot do this. The safety issues, all kinds of stuff. So my father-in-law was with us. So we left Aiden with my father-in-law, and then we had the option. Then we had to do it twice in the remaining 20, 30 minutes that was left, and we managed to do it. So we held the record was given to us. So it was one of those interesting mornings where you wake up not knowing what's going to be in store, and you just rock up, and then all kinds of things transpire. But obviously, it's something really special because, yes, I share it with my wife, but officially, Aiden also has this because technically he was part of the first attempt. So hopefully when he's old enough, that's something that I can tell him the story of and give him the record certificate as well.
So, okay, like, let's face another thing, that you have been in the front line in the past year, and you have seen a lot, the whole COVID situation and how it has, drastically affected on the mental health of people, physical health, of course, and also the economy
Yeah.
of the whole country. So, how do you explain that, and how do you recommend people, even the government, I suppose, so that we can fight this kind of a pandemic if we face something like this in the coming decades or after
I'm
that? How
Yeah,
do you
I count myself very blessed to have been in a situation wherein I had a skill that could have been deployed and was of service to humanity. Remember that I had been out of clinical medicine. I effectively had been on a sabbatical since I moved to India from London in 2011. So it was well over 10 years, and my wife and I, we had a conversation about how do we do this really? And ultimately, my thought was that if the situation was so bad that they required people who had been out of clinical medicine for over a decade to help out, then clearly things needed to be assisted on. So I put my name down, and a few weeks later, I got a phone call to say, "Are you willing to step forward?" And I did that for around 3.5 months. I was, for those of whom would remember, this is early on, so this is March, April time. You'd remember Dharavi was the hotspot in India, and I was positioned in Jiwad South, which is Worli to Dadar, the belt in Mumbai, Worli to Dadar, which is where everything was kicking off. And I led a surveillance team, and my job was really to go into the communities, slum communities and residential communities, and identify people who were suspected COVID patients. This is before we had mass testing available. So we had to really rely on clinical history and basic observational stuff that we had. It was, as I said, I consider myself blessed that I was in that situation to do that. And some of my I think things that I will remember the most out of my entire career were those moments spent. Unfortunately, however, a few months after I started to develop symptoms, and then I had COVID, and it took me quite a few months to recuperate and get back on my feet for a variety of reasons. But everything's fine now, and I'm glad that globally we're in a situation where India is leading the vaccine efforts. It's the largest vaccine sort of rollout in history. And the fact that our government has done so much right from the beginning in locking down early to build up the public health infrastructure and acquire the equipment and the resources and the capacity required to then deal with it. Of course, we've been very fortunate in India with a significant number of cases falling in the mild category, asymptomatic category as well. But the vaccine rollouts are happening. We're going tomorrow, day after, in fact, to have our shot. And I encourage everyone to listen out to the news and to sort of understand when your time will be called upon to have that, and up until then to do the simple things: wear a mask, maintain physical distance, and wash our hands.
So I was also coming to that, since you have seen the whole situation and you have also been affected by the
Yeah.
disease, the virus. So do you think that after this whole vaccination program, it will there's always a certain kind of doubt that is now prevailing on people, that maybe it won't work, maybe they don't know,
Yeah.
they are all skeptical. So what do you recommend during this time to calm people down and to say some words of
I think,
assurance from your
unfortunately, for
side?
a variety of reasons, COVID has been heavily politicized around the world. And really, it began in the US with the Republican versus Democrat debates around masks, and that has transpired to many countries, fueled by conspiracy theorists and the anti-vax movement now. What we need to be very cognizant and appreciative of is that never before in human history has the scientific community been able to create an antidote to a novel agent which was not seen previously in the space of under a calendar year, right? It took us practically from March to October, wherein a vaccine was actually produced. So that was an incredible effort, and every single scientist around the world should be lauded for this contribution to society. Now, I understand our hesitancies because of the fact that clinical data is sparse. The communicative narrative from regulatory bodies and international authorities have been confusing at times. And of course, we are prey to our own individual anxieties and fear, which, as I said, is being augmented by this conspiracist anti-vax movement as well. But what we've seen is that there are a number of leading candidates which have now been prescribed globally. And in India, of course, we have a couple of those which are being provided to people out there. Now, so therefore, I encourage each of us to read the literature for yourself, have a conversation with your medical practitioner, and make a decision. But let that be led by science. Let it not be fueled by the misinformation and the disinformation which exists, which is propagated through a lot of social network and social media as well.
So people are, having trouble regarding coping up mentally, physically. So what do you tell them?
COVID-19 has been a challenge for its multidimensionality. And I use that word purposefully, and let me explain what I mean by that. there's the physical impact of having the disease, right, which has a lot of psychological manifestations of that. You then have this situation wherein you were looking after or caring for people who had the disease, either in your home or they were in another home and they were locked in because of the quarantine and the containment efforts. And that, of course, produces a lot of psychological problems and challenges. And then lastly, as you spoke about at the top, the economic consequences of us having to have so many job losses and the fact that our GDP contracted at 23% quarter on quarter, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So this is why this has been a particularly challenging period of time. In fact, the World Economic Forum, which I do a lot of work with, is put this as the largest psychological experiment ever conducted in human history. So I think for each of us, we have had that moment over the last 9, 10, 11 months now, coming up to almost a year, right? We're in February now, and it's March 16th that Janta Curfew was announced. So almost 11 months. We have each had that moment where we've had to really had that moment of honesty and self-reflection in terms of, number one, what are my priorities in life? Number two, based on this, I hate this word new normal, but there is a change which has happened in society because of 2020. And honestly, it is unlikely that we will ever go fully back to how we were in 2019 for a variety of reasons, not just the fact because of the virus, but it's changed human behaviors in so many ways. And I wrote about this for a column series that I write for Forbes, and I've called it Generation C, Generation COVID, and I encourage folks to read up on that. So there have been some fundamental behavior changes that will be with us and that will stay with us for many years. So we've each got to understand, based on these paradigm, tectonic shifts that are happening around us, what is my priority right now? How do I live a life which is sustainable based on those priorities, right? And how can I, and I think this is the most important piece, how can I be a contributing member of society? Because I think for so many of us, 2020 was an opportunity to give back, either from the volunteer efforts that we saw people do, from helping our neighbors, helping people close to us, the recognition of how important health and well-being plays in our life, etc. And I think we as a society have become much more connected now, and I feel more globally conscious. And I think the climate crisis is a big conversation that we need to now build on based on these learnings that we've had together in 2020.
So we have come to the last part of this whole conversation, and it was very enlightening talking to you regarding all these factors. The last thing which I want you to tell our audience, that the book, that incredible book that we can see right behind you. So what are the readers, like what should they expect, and how is this book going to, much more give them is the broad view that they will get from this book?
2020 gave us the recognition of the competitive advantage of well-being. What I mean by that is I think every one of us has recognized how important our health and our well-being is in our ability to perform and be productive, etc. What I've tried to do in this book is hopefully inspire us all to just simply be amazed at how incredible this organic machine is. And not in a typical way of just writing about the human body. Someone described it really well. It's the juxtaposition between the biology and the outside world, the inside world and the outside world, that I've tried to bring together. And that's why each of the chapters has been structured in a particular way. So the vehicle of writing is you, the reader, puts your feet in the protagonist. So whether you choose to read the chapter on summiting Mount Everest, I describe to you what summiting Mount Everest is like, from base camp to the first, second, third advanced camp, all the way through to the summit. So what does that look like? What does that feel like? And then what's happening to your cellular biology? What are the challenges that your body is going through in order for you to get there, both from a disease perspective and from a health perspective as well? And then there's a lot of interesting anecdotes and stories and expedition narratives, etc. So all of us who are missing the great outdoors now because we've not been able to travel as much, well, then there's plenty of that in here as well, both on Earth and beyond. I take you to the moons of Saturn. I take you to the red planet Mars, and we go with Neil Armstrong and place one small step for man on our natural satellite as well. So there's plenty of natural stories in here, and based on the fact that it's all about the biology. and hopefully keep you inspired to reach your human edge through the process as well.
A brilliant, brilliant effort from your side, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. As I too am a science enthusiast, and I don't think that this book is only restricted to science enthusiasts, as we all
Yeah.
are curious by nature. And I would love to, quench all my thirst regarding all those whatever you just said, because it has already intrigued me, and it has already, I have already started thinking of getting it right
Thank you.
now and opening it. So it was great talking to you and getting to know whatever you shared with us, your knowledge regarding the whole pandemic situation and how we should cope up. So thanks a lot for being with us today, and thanks a
Thank you for
lot for
having me,
sharing with
and
us.
I wish everyone the greatest of well-being. Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Sharmila Maiti from Sharmila Showhouse, and please subscribe my channel, click the bell button for more updates.